Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In the previous video we covered the DTK1000, a gorgeous XT class machine from around 1986, complete with keyboard, monitor, floppy drive, hard drive and software. Now in today's video I wanted to walk you through the actual ownership of such an XT class machine. Think of it as kind of a buying guide for XT class machines. I know that one could say that they are slow, heavy, expensive, and not really useful in today's time frame. Even from a collector's standpoint, you are limited to the type of software and games that they can run. Don't expect any fancy 3D graphics or super fast speeds. But on the other hand, these machines are part of a very important aspect of PC history, and I personally believe that every retro collector should at least consider owning one or have the experience using one. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Because having a computer from 1985 or 1986 is a whole lot different than picking up a retro Pentium machine. If you're fortunate enough to get one from a fellow retro collector, it might be complete with keyboard and monitor, but it's also possible that you end up buying the computer unit alone without keyboard and monitor and all of that. And also, given the fact that these machines are almost 40 years old, that's right, 40 years, I mean, some of them will be in a questionable state. They will be untested. They might not work when you turn them on. You might have to deal with power supply issues. You might have to deal with capacitors that need replacing, or come across nasty stuff like this that will almost certainly make you reconsider your decision. And if you only have the unit, you'll find that it might be difficult to hook up a modern monitor or even find a matching keyboard. And when you finally have it up and running, how do you get software on the thing? And what kind of software can you run? Now all of that will be tackled in today's video. So let's start with the storage. In most XT class machines, you will get either one or two 360K floppy drives. Now I have a thing for these 5¼ inch floppies. I like the sound that they make, I love the look and feel, and to some degree they are still useful for these XT class machines. More often than not, you will need them to boot the machine, to format the hard drive, or even just to load up software. After all, 360 kilobytes back in the day was sufficient for big programs like Lotus 123 or WordPerfect. But there are also a couple of downsides to working with these floppy drives. Just take a look at the video I did on the Tandon disk drive repair on my old IBM PC. But fortunately for us, a lot of XT class machines also come with hard drives. Now, of course, the original IBM PC released at the end of 1981 didn't have a hard drive. It came with two full-height 5¼ inch 360 kilobyte floppy drives. Now that all changed with the IBM PC XT, which was released in 1983. This one came with a 10 megabyte MFM hard drive. The Seagate ST412, even bigger than the hard drive which is found in this DTK Data 1000. Only difference here is that this full-height hard drive only has a capacity of 10 megabytes. That's right, 10 megabytes. But chances are that in your clone XT machine, you will find a 20 megabyte MFM hard drive much like this one. The Seagate ST225 was a very popular hard drive back in the day that would find its way in lots of XT class machines. Now, I myself like an MFM hard drive just as much as the next guy. I mean, they're big, bulky, loud. They can sometimes behave erratic, but I guess that's all part of the charm. But they can also fail. However, I do have to say that the last 10 5¼ inch MFM hard drives that I've had to deal with, at least 7 of them were still working, and I was able to format them, albeit some with a couple of bad sectors. 3½ inch MFM hard drives appear to be a lot more error prone. But despite that, I've always been surprised by the fact that these 5¼ inch MFM drives continue working today. But you know, what are you gonna do? It's not like you can plug in a USB thumb drive or an SD card in your XT class machine, right? Or is it? Let's welcome the XT IDE solution, a hardware and software combination that works on the XT Universal BIOS that is flashed onto a ROM chip, hooked up to a PCB, and then inserted in an 8-bit ISA slot of your computer, giving you access to flash storage. It can be compact flash or an SD card. So this opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can simply pull the compact flash card out of your computer right now and put it in a modern laptop, for example, to transfer software, which makes it very convenient to get software in and out. As soon as you boot the PC with the XT IDE card installed, you will see the XT IDE Universal BIOS prompt, and it should boot straight off the compact flash card. And that makes it super convenient. You can allocate up to 8 gigabytes of storage in 2 gigabyte partitions, for example, in MS-DOS, giving you access to lots of software. Next up, keyboards. Now you might notice that your computer has a pretty standard DIN style connector, but that doesn't mean you can hook up any type of old style keyboard, because these XT class machines need XT keyboards. Now some older keyboards have this switch, which allows you to switch between AT mode, allowing them to be hooked up to a 286, 386 or 486, and to XT mode, making them work on an XT class machine. So if you do pick up an XT class machine, you will need to find an XT compatible keyboard or one of these switchable keyboards like the ones I've shown you here, because the DIN style connector on the keyboard itself will not tell you if this keyboard is XT compatible. Next up, we need to talk about monitors. Now you'll notice that your XT class machine doesn't come with a VGA video card or a VGA connector. The 15-pin D-sub connector used by VGA that was used for over 2 decades is missing here. Instead, what you get is a 9-pin D-sub connector. Now this will already give you a clue that you cannot use a VGA monitor, but you can use a monochrome monitor, a CGA monitor, or perhaps even an EGA monitor, depending on the video card which is installed in the computer. The EGA, which is the rarest, can display up to 16 colors at the same time. CGA is limited to 4 colors, and monochrome, well, is monochrome. Now you do need to take into account that some of these monitors can be difficult to find, especially EGA, but even CGA monitors are getting hard to come by. Monochrome displays, on the other hand, are pretty common. But no 256 VGA colors here, my friend. When talking monochrome displays, funnily enough, you can get them in all kinds of different colors. I personally like the phosphor green like you see here on my IBM 5151, but you can also get them in a really nice looking amber color like this one. I don't know exactly what it is with this particular color scheme, but I find it really soothing and relaxing to look at, to work with. I like how the games look, I like how the text looks. It's not as in your face as the phosphor green of the IBM 5151 monitor, but overall a really nice aesthetic and a really lovely look and feel. Or you can go with this kind of grayish white color. Now I have to say, personally, this one doesn't really do all that much to me. It is definitely monochrome, so there is no color involved here. But yeah, it's kind of this milky gray white feel. But to those that are thinking about getting a monitor, I also highly recommend the IBM 5151. They are pretty common. You can get them relatively cheap, and it's just an iconic monitor. I love the look and feel. I'm not talking about the phosphor green, but just the way that this monitor looks is just really, really amazing. But to the people that want to wimp out completely and want to hook up a VGA monitor to their XT class machine, this little device here has got you covered, because this will take your PC video as input and it will output it to a VGA monitor. And this basically allows you to hook up, a standard serial cable, which is a 9-pin D-sub connector, from your video card onto this little MCE2 VGA device. You will obviously need to power it also. It comes with a USB cable and charger, And then you just hook it up to your video card on the one hand, using the 9-pin D-sub connector, and then you hook it up to a modern quote-unquote VGA monitor. And this will allow you to display the computer's monochrome, CGA or EGA on your VGA monitor. And the MCE to VGA even allows you to specify or to cycle through these color schemes like the phosphor green or the amber or the white. So that's a really cool feature. I highly recommend you taking a look at this MCE to VGA device. If you have an old computer which doesn't support VGA, I will link to a Certa shop that sells these little devices. This is not an affiliate link. I'm not making any money on it. I do know the owner of this shop. I would like to give a shout out to him. Please check out his web shop at certaashop.be. He's based in Belgium like I am. He sells lots of cool stuff like retro sound cards, MIDI stuff. So yeah, some of his stuff has already been featured on other tech channels like LGR. So yeah, definitely check him out. But let's look at some software. And we'll start with Checkit version 3. Now, Checkit has this built-in benchmarking program giving you an indication of the overall speed of the main system. So here you can see that it will measure both the CPU speed and the math speed. So here we have the turbo function enabled, meaning that it runs at 10 megahertz. And this is roughly 2 times the speed of an IBM PC XT. Now the speed here is measured in dry stones and wet stones. And you can see that when you turn the turbo button on or off, you can see an increase and a decrease in the overall speed, as the CPU frequency will go from 4.77 megahertz all the way up to 10 megahertz. And it's not only in these kind of synthetic benchmarks that you will see an actual difference, it's also when playing games. For example, here the Grand Prix circuit game, which has Hercules support, will give you a good indication just how fast or slow this PC runs. Now this is a pretty demanding game for an XT class machine. It is definitely playable, but you will have some difficulties playing this at 4.7 megahertz. So we have it running now at 10 megahertz, but when I disable the turbo function, you can see that the frame rate is significantly dropped and it becomes really difficult to navigate the car here. A big difference when the turbo switch is turned on. Now there is some discussion if turning the turbo button on actually increases or decreases the speed, because the actual goal of the turbo button is to make the PC slower in order to make it more compatible. Because, you know, in the early days, lots of software was specifically created for these 4.7 megahertz machines. And if you had a CPU which was clocked at 10 megahertz, you could have issues with certain software. Now, if you're into databases and that type of stuff, I would highly recommend you checking out dBase, which is the iconic database application from the, early 80s. It basically allows you to create a database file where you define the overall structure of the file, meaning you can define the columns, the data types, the data sizes. And then you can actually enter data into your database. You can choose to print it out using a printer or to display it on the screen. It's really old school, and I really like the way that these kind of old school, applications like databases were created back in the day, and it's really fun to work with them now. Another popular piece of software that you often find on old computers is Broderbund Banner Mania. And this allows you to create these kind of banners that you can then either print out or display on your monitor. You can select different types of fonts. You can enter your little message here. You can also use special characters. I can imagine this was a whole lot of fun back in the day to create these types of things and, show them around the screen. You can also see that the XT needs to do a lot of work just to get these, banners moving around on the screen. There's definitely some dropped frames here, so it's not a speed demon by any stretch of the imagination. WordPerfect, I mean, another iconic piece of software. It's very bare bones in the sense that you just get this blinking cursor and some status messages on the bottom right, but that's basically it. That's how we did word processing back in the day. But again, it's always nice to explore these types of programs, find out what keyboard shortcuts they were and how people were actually using this software in the 80s. Another personal favorite of mine is Lotus 123, the iconic spreadsheet application for the IBM PC, allowing you to enter text, numbers, do calculations. Unfortunately, with this version, I was unable to display any graphs. I did create a video a while back on Lotus 123 using both an MDA Hercules monitor and a CGA screen with a dual screen setup. If you like that kind of stuff, please check out this video. And again, I mean, it's always interesting to see how these kinds of applications were used back in the day and just how much they differ with the modern counterparts. Another iconic application that you can run on an XT computer is an early version of AutoCAD, the computer-aided design program used to create 3D drawings or other types of stuff. I once found this on an old XT, and here's a fresh copy of, I think, one of the first AutoCAD versions. And this has an office drawing as kind of a demo drawing inside it. So let's load it up and let's just see how long it takes to load up the thing. So as you can see, it is building up the 3D image right now, which is basically like an office setting with a couple of desks. And I think in total it takes about 7 minutes or something to load up this drawing. And every time you do an action, like you do a zoom or you do a move, you have to wait until the drawing is re-rendered. So you can just imagine how painstaking it was to create these types of things. But on the other hand, I mean, it's definitely a lot better than doing it with pen and paper. So yeah, I always find it fascinating to look at these kind of applications on these older XT machines. But now let's speed up the footage a little bit so that we can see what exactly is being rendered here. And here you can see a couple of desks with some stuff on it, some tables, some walls. So yeah, really fun to play with on an XT class computer, providing that you have the patience, of course. I can also execute commands like the zoom command, which will zoom out of the drawing. And as you can see, again, it needs to re-render the entire thing. It has an AutoCAD title here in the drawing, so it's rendering that. So let's speed everything up. And here we have the drawing again. And again, this takes about 6 or 7 minutes or so to completely redraw this, this office setting. But yeah, pretty cool nonetheless. But computers are also meant to be fun, right? So let's load up some games. And just to hear that guitar sound blasting out of the PC speaker. And I also find this really fascinating that they were able to, output so much rich sounds out of that PC speaker back in the day. So yeah, really cool game here, Crazy Cars by Titus. A racing game, arcade style, pretty fun to play. And just notice how much screen real estate is actually wasted here by not drawing something on it. You're literally only using about 30 or 40% of the screen. Another cool game is Jett, which is a very early flight simulator game. I think it had some decent graphics at the time, and also it's something that is definitely playable on an XT class machine. Again, definitely not a speed demon, but I mean, Microsoft Flight Simulator, for example, on these early PC also wasn't very fast. So This one does support Hercules, it supports keyboards, joysticks, you have different gaming modes. And then, you know, it loads up this kind of 3D scenery as you start the game. In this particular case, we're going to start from a carrier. So here we have the cockpit view, but we can also switch to the tower view, which is this one. And then we can basically launch our way from the aircraft carrier and then do a liftoff. Again, not very fast, but definitely playable, and I can imagine that this was, you know, lots of fun back in the day. I mean, I think the 3D drawings are pretty good given, you know, the time era where this was released. It's not the fastest game, obviously, but it gives you time to familiarize yourself with the controls and not crash immediately. So let's retract the landing gear here and let's fly off into the distance. Another classic is Blockout from California Games. Just listen to the high-pitch PC speaker sound. So yeah, this is more of a puzzle game, kind of a 3D Tetris type of thing. Runs very well on an XT class machine. Also love the PC speaker sounds on this one. And yeah, just a, you know, fun little game to play. It actually takes a little bit of skill, and you need to, you know, familiarize yourself with the keyboard shortcuts, but yeah, pretty fun game to play. And with that, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, where we talked about different aspects of owning an XT class computer using this DDK Data 1000 as an example. We've looked at different monitor setups, including hooking up modern VGA panels. We've talked about storage using floppy disks and hard drives and flash storage. And we also looked at some pieces of software and games. So as always, if you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and I really hope to see you all very soon. Bye bye.